Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this episode of the On the Mark Financial Forum and Podcast. I'm very excited for today's guest, somebody that I met recently that just immediately caught my eye as something that has a great message that we need to get out to people. So that's why we're here. So I'd like to introduce you to Lynn Lambrecht, who is the founder of The Living Planner. Lynn, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, Mark, it's a pleasure to be here. And come on, if you've got a podcast called On the Mark, I want to say get set and go.
There we go. Let's do it. Here we go. Diving right in. So, Lynn, tell us a little bit about yourself and what do you do at the Living Planner?
The Living Planner is really the patchwork quilt pieces of my life. Preparation and planning has been kind of part of my mantra. Maybe being the youngest in the family and observing everything. I was like the keen observer. But I will tell you, in my professional career in aviation, I was in aviation for over 30 years. I've had the opportunity to live in 17 places around the world, which is remarkable. And I worked in the sales and management side and then elevated and things of that nature. But I was also a volunteer emergency team responder. And that was very humbling because I worked like airplane crash sites and I worked two in my 20s and then I worked 9/11 in my 40s with each carrier that I was with. And what I learned from that was the absolute devastation of what happens in a blink of an eye. But what really, I think, made me the saddest was that people in the time that they deserve to grieve the most were too panicked about the practical nature of their lives. Kind of understanding, in families, guess what? We divide and conquer by our strengths. And so, honey, you do this, I've got that, blah, 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 blah. But we don't often leave that cute little, what I call the trail of breadcrumbs or the roadmap for the other one to truly understand the intricacies of what do you mean online accounts? What do you mean that this is here? And I honestly am sad that we don't have that conversation proactively more often. So, in time, as I dealt with each of my parents' health declines, my dad with Alzheimer's, when I came back from Asia to come back to the States and help so that I was at least closer than 8,000 miles away, then I
Yeah,
could
for as
drive
far
home.
away as you can get.
Yeah, that was pretty far, and so, like, thank you at that time, I was with Northwest when I started and then with United. So United's headquarters was in Chicago, and I had grown up across the state in, the Quad Cities, and so I was able to drive home every weekend and help prepare my mom for those intricacies and be there in support of my dad. Now, before I had left for Asia, I had, given them as only the oldest of the 2nd generation of children can do, the lecture of I can help you. I can't help you if you don't give me permission to help you. I can fly home from anywhere in 24 hours. You know that if I don't have those necessary permissions. So thankfully, after 13 and a half years of a little drip, 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 drip every few months, we finally did a lot of the preparation work that I now help people do. And
That's great.
with
Yeah, tell us
mom,
about what does that preparation work look like and who do you
I'm
do
not
it for?
let's clarify it up front. I'm not an attorney. I am not a financial advisor. I do not sell insurance. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a tax mitigation specialist. I'm not an end of life celebration person, all of those things. But I think because of my roles in my world, I have interfaced with all of that. And in Asia, I mean, I was heading up an airline. So, I have a strong business sense, but my big, soft, chocolate covered, smushy heart is where I want to lead. And I think that for families, yes, I think it's important that we understand how all the professionals I mentioned play a role in our lives. And yet, there are daily activities that, I mean, when I did my first legal work in my 20s, I looked at the attorneys and said, okay, so where's the rest? Because, I'd named my power of attorney for finances and for healthcare, and I had done my health directive, and I had stated who the executor was going to be, and I had beneficiaries, on my accounts and all those kinds of things. But what they didn't address was how does somebody get into where I live? How does somebody know what my car is and where I park? How does somebody know how to get my mail? I mean, it starts there, but then there are a gazillion little things that we do on autopilot every day So I love to explore, I mean, truly what, and especially with families, what each of them are doing and making sure that they understand what the other one is doing and how they're doing it. So that's a piece of it. And then I really talk about, the protection strategies that we have through financial planning and insurance planning and, legal planning and all of those natures, because I speak a layperson's language. And I think that in the case of my parents, they were hesitant because they didn't know what to ask and they didn't know what they didn't know. And they were, my dad he told me later, the reason I haven't done this, because I said, Dad, what has taken me pushing for this long for you to do this? And he said, Well, Lenny, after World War II, I had dealt pretty much with death all the time. Am I going to come home? Blah, 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 blah. And after my brother was born, my sister was born, and I was the afterthought. So they had done some basic legal stuff, but they hadn't done all the rest. But I was in my 30s, late 30s, when I was moving to China. I just said, it's been a long while. The state and national laws changed. And he said, Honey, I don't understand the implications of all of that like you do. You're playing in a business environment and get that. So I was kind of their layperson interpreter. So we went to local establishments, we checked on beneficiaries. And when we get to the attorney's office, I said, I want this is private. I can sit outside. And they each grabbed a hand and said, Oh, no, you won't. You're coming in here and making sure we understand. And, so it's something that I want people to feel comfortable as they can, because the emotional woogies come into play and I get that. But as comfortable as they can, at least having some baseline questions or fully understanding what terms are and what they mean and the implication for their daily life. I'm the daily life kid. I'm a pain in the butt. My siblings think I'm a pain in the butt.
Well, that's okay because you're helping them. So they'll appreciate it someday. That's what I always say about my kids, although I'm not holding my breath. Not anytime soon. So it sounds like, I mean, I'm a very visual person. So it sounds like you have these pillars of financial planning, estate planning, of all these things that there are professionals that do the actual activity. It
Correct.
seems like you fill in all the gaps between.
I
Is
tend to
that a
be
fair
I can't. Yeah, I hope. And what I don't know. But I mean, even for the business owners, there's so much change going on in this crazy world of ours for non-business owners, for workers, for, kids that are 18. I mean, there's just a lot of change going on. And I'm the nerd that loves to read and, access that information. So I think information is power, and it's not only powerful if it's shared. So, yes, I do love to fill in the gaps. And I'll tell you, the end of life planning is often omitted. And maybe it's because I have had a hand in so many celebration of life incidences because of my work on site during the devastations, the crashes, that it's such a way to honor people. And whether people want that or not, I think what I notice more and more is that how hesitant we are to have the conversation about any of it. And we anticipate like the pushback or the resistance, or we sometimes don't want to think about it ourselves because there's a mortality woogie that lives. But I have a lot of compassion for that. And I try to make this as I try to make it very meaningful, but I also try to make it doable, because I think that, providing authorizations, that can get a lot more in your head. And so it's like, oh, okay, who gets this and that and that? That part's kind of cool. The access, same kind of thing. It's in our heads. It's kind of cool. But then when it, comes down to the action, that's where I see the hesitation. And so, I mean, always, when I have like a well-being checkup, I, really say you have basics, because what we go through, like life, if you will, and I do a recap and identify little gaps and where they can help fill them. And I'll just say, you've got a lot now for you to do. Do you want to, and that let's have a follow-up call, because this was like drinking from a fire hose. And then after that follow-up call, I just say, "Okay, now tell me, do you have enough to go on your own? Is it something that where you would like some accountability? And then other things I do workshops, because sometimes it's grab and go. I mean, I had a fire near my place just a few weeks ago, and I'm watching people in my complex literally staring and not moving. And here I am in 5 minutes, I'm out the door because I do my prep. So this isn't always about health issues. This isn't always about dying. This is about living and coming home and making sure that you can start over.
Right. Well, and one of the things that you mentioned in our first meeting that really caught my eye is planning also, like people think about planning for later in life,
I
they're
do it
doing
now.
yeah, well, not just that, but there's some components to that that when you become a legal adult, which is 18 and we might
18.
still be living at home, that you need to think about a healthcare proxy and, different things that
It's really
because
interesting
something could
because
happen to you while you're at college for all we know, college
I have
students
2
do lots of
examples of
dumb things.
myself in college. One,
Please.
when I was 17 and went out of state to college. Of course, my family is, doctors and dentists, and so, of course, I went to the health center and I indicated that I had an allergy to penicillin and codeine, and all that stuff. But I mean, I'm a pretty healthy little horse. Turned 18, went home for Christmas, came back and got strep throat. Went to the health center. Guess what? They didn't read my chart, shot me up with penicillin. I woke up in an ice bath with a 105-degree fever. And the first thing I asked was, "Did you call my mom and dad?" And they said, "No, we don't have permission to do so." And I think part of, again, like with the illegal responsibilities that come when you turn 18, combined with independence, I love working with the kids. I was an RA in college and a head res in grad school. So, I mean, like getting into the nitty gritty of, hey, who's going to pay your Spotify? And hey, if something ever happens, have you given authorization for someone to be notified and all that kind of stuff? They kind of look at me like, what? I have to do that? So I think part of it, sometimes I'm educating the parents because, it's a coming of age type thing. And it's not an embarrassment when we don't know, but it's just the laws across each of our states they are different, and yet there is a pretty common component of 18 for a lot of these decisions. So it's fun to start with that generation and try to educate. And I do that. I have a lot of student interns, and so they're my first guinea pigs with this stuff. And then I can do things,
Well, I mean, the story you gave is a perfect example where, you're off at college thinking everything's going to be fine.
That's
Nobody ever
cool.
thinks anything's going to happen. When you're 18, you'll be fine. You'll figure it out. And then you have a healthcare situation and your own parents or, whoever's
You
caring
need
for
to
you.
make sure that there's that extra step because I mean, I was fortunate to grow up in a household that actually was involved in my life. I know everyone doesn't have that, but there are people in our world, even when we don't have that, that we would maybe trust to be that person contacted. And I think it's important for all of us to just kind of, from the elder caregiver side to the young adult side, that we understand, I mean, who are your people? So a theme that I carry throughout all age groups, because I target that and I target sandwich generation and small and, business owners for their employees and for themselves. And what's interesting is that all of us need to identify our helpers. Who are our helpers? I mean, I'm not Mrs. Rogers, but I mean, that's where we go with it.
Right. And you're getting into detail of like small logistics. Like I would imagine who has a key to your home or
God, yes.
apartment or whatever, so that if something were to happen to you, somebody could go in
Come
and
on in.
your dog
What's your
or
backup plan for your pets? I mean,
right. Right. So
and
you're getting
kids.
into that much detail. I mean, an estate attorney isn't going to get into that much detail for
Well, and we
sure.
should, and we don't expect them to. I mean,
Right.
covering the legal components, unless, that's somebody that needs to be named if you have a pet protection agreement or you're doing something for pet care or you have a guardianship agreement because of your children that are under 18. Those are the legal pieces, but I like to get into what does that mean?
Right. What are the logistics if
How
you
does that come into
move
play? Why does
illegally
that
into
come
your
into
home?
play? What does that mean? And why would
Right.
you even want to think about it? And blah, 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 blah.
And I imagine you're having different conversations. Maybe they're
every
intertwined to
day.
a degree, but different conversations with people at different stages of life. So business owners might have a different set of needs than someone who's just about to turn 18. But God, I think this is like you said, a great gift, so to speak, to your child who's turning 18, becoming more independent and responsible for themselves, to also make sure that they're thinking about what to do in emergency. It's kind of like having an emergency bag for an earthquake or a flood or a
The go
hurricane
bag.
or yeah,
But you know
that's how
what's
I
so funny?
understand.
I was the big chicken. I did not tell my parents that story until, like, 30 years later because I knew they would have been furious
Right.
and
The same
embarrassed.
thing with me when I went skydiving at 18. I didn't tell them, and heaven forbid something would have happened.
I mean,
They
I've
wouldn't
done
have
my
had
bungees,
healthcare
I've done we
options
do
for
that
me.
stuff when
Right.
especially when we're young.
But I mean, it was so enlightening for me when we first met because nobody talks about that stuff. They talk about the estate planning and the big staples of things
And
that
it's
you need to
amazing
have.
because we need all of it, but I just like to view life holistically because, I mean, yeah, we it's like, okay, I've created, like, this little org chart for our lives, like with the CEO. I mean, I and all of that for the people who feel better mind wise looking at it from that perspective. And I have them all in their departmental categories with all the little things. Cause that for me, I know it's hard to deal with the emotion sometimes. I mean, it can be. So for some people, it's just it's something that's a no go. Other people are like, okay, what does that mean? So it just kind of depends on the person. I have like a saying that we can't predict, but we can prepare. And it's kind of like going to the gym. We don't get six pack abs the first visit. And so when something really hits, it's really nice to have a little muscle memory to say, okay, good. This sucks, but this is what I need to grab and go to the ER, or this is what I need to do for this. Because you have it, practice makes perfect.
And then how do you organize it for a family so that if they're in that crisis moment, they remember what to do or they know where to go to figure out what to do, and if they're not thinking straight about, "Oh, I had this meeting and I remember these were the steps I was," they're not gonna remember that in a panic moment. So how do you
They may or may
document that?
not, but I will tell you, this is again where I just try to reinforce as best I can. And for those who choose to actually work on like a commitment calendar where we work monthly and take our time. I mean, because frankly, there's a lot of information to gather and a lot of stuff to do. It's not the 5-minute fix. So, each time, then it's like, okay, and where are your documents located? Where is this? Where is that? But the other part, Mark, that's absolutely maddening. I know that I mean, I prepare like, I could leave in 5 minutes when I had the helicopter circling, the fire trucks arriving, and they were saying, "Evacuate, evacuate immediately." Yeah, I have the empty backpack underneath my desk, so the computers went in with the mouse and the charger. The fireproof safe is in that closet. I could grab that. I already have, like, a lantern, water, clothes, blah, 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 in the car, and, just I knew I could grab and go. But that's if you're home. So what happens if that kind of natural disaster happens when you're away? So that's where you want to make sure that you've got like your digital backup so that you can access safely and securely. Make sure cybersecurity is like pretty high on my list of concerns. So, we need to be able to function either way.
Right. Yeah, the example that comes to mind is the recent fires in California, which were so intense and people having to just
Leave.
leave.
You got to
Yeah.
go. And you grab your dog and you grab your baby and out you're
Right. Yeah, your immediate priority list, but there's probably some other things that, people who are unfortunate enough to have that problem probably wish they had a moment to just kind of think, or a list already there ready to
Well, and
go to,
that's why,
you
I
know.
mean, like, documents and things of that nature, I mean, especially for insurance claims and fire or earthquake, I mean, your grant deed or your renter's agreement, I'm pretty darn thorough.
Yeah, I would imagine it's like a checkup, but
It
navigating
that's
the
why I call
corner.
it the well-being checkup.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Well, you're on the right path with that name. If it came out of my mouth, then you're probably on the right track for what people are thinking about when you say it. Uh, so tell me a little bit about what the process looks like when somebody comes to you and says, "Okay, I'm sandwich generation. I'm a business owner. I have kids who are turning 18." What does the process look like to go through to create that plan? And what is the end result? Like, what is the product
Yep,
or handout
yep.
or whatever it is?
I think the first step is to make sure that we have clear expectations of and for each other. So I offer a complimentary discovery call just to say what is it that you're hoping for and what you expect. These are the things that I'm I'd like to explore. I mean, is that something that's comfortable? If and when they say yes, then we have my well-being checkup, and that is something where it's usually, I mean, it can be a single person if it's a single person. It can be, like the partners if it's, family, things of that nature, and sometimes partners in business. I have done that too because we talk first about their individual preparation, like if something were to happen to you, are you and your family protected? And now let's get into the business side. And I mean, I just go through like lists of questions, and that is usually on Zoom. And I give the option to record it if people are comfortable with that or, want to make sure because there's a lot of information flowing back and forth. So I record it, I upload it privately and securely and send it back out to them, but I also go back through, like, what the questions were that I had asked and identify their status in each of the questions, and that usually takes about an hour and a half. What we do is have a follow-up call after that because I mean, there's one price for that and the follow-up call, and then I'll say, "Okay, hold on, is this clear as mud? Or where are you getting tripped up? How are you doing? How do you wanna map it out?" Because these are the areas that where there are gaps. And so I have made, recommendations of things where they can start or people they can contact or if do they want help finding people to help with certain areas, that's the question that I always ask because there can be a lot of follow-up. And that's something that I mean that's part of the program for me. So that's kind of how we start. If they desire to have accountability, I had one young couple. They each had businesses, they had children, they have parents, and we started talking about what they needed to help their parents should that be ever necessary. Then we got into them, and then we got into the children and the businesses. So, and they wanted an accountability because they said, okay, this is great, but we'll never do it. We're busy. And I said, I
That
know.
would be my problem too.
I said,
I'm
I
good at
know.
making a list that I never look at again.
We're all busy. So, okay, I mean, how about tell me your time frame where you would like this completed? And they said, months. And I said, "Okay." And they said, "Really?" And I said, "You were hoping that I'd say no." And they said, "Oh, yeah, we know you." Yeah, we were. And I said, "No, it's fine. Let's just take a few things every month. And it'll be a commitment calendar, and I will send it out, and I will do a check-in, and this is how we're gonna do it." And that's really what we did. And in month 17, they called and said, "We want you to go to the attorney's office with us." And I said, "Oh, I don't know if that will be terribly popular, but if the permission is granted, I will sit quietly and take notes." That's and permission was granted, and so I sat quietly and took notes. But then, they opened up the door when the attorneys were saying, "Well, do you have any questions?" And so they each had a question, and then they looked at me and said, "Do we have more questions?"
Well, you're like a family advocate in that example and so many others that you've given. It's hard for people to conceptualize all the things that they need to think about. So obviously there's gonna
It's
be gaps.
overwhelming, and I will tell you, I learn new things every day that are turning my hair gray, if you can see that. And so it's something where keeping on our toes with kind of that administrative side of life that we're never taught about, it's comprehensive, I'll tell you. I mean, there are days when I feel like I'm researching stuff and from morning till night, and then it's like, "Oh my god, let me breathe."
Right. Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking about my own family and my own parents. If something were to happen to them, I'm thinking right now, I don't have a key. I don't have a key to their apartment. I wouldn't be able to get in unless someone from the building magically,
You found the
was able.
maintenance person.
Yeah, there
you
is
know?
no maintenance person, it's a small building, so,
But you know
just
what
the
I mean?
logistics of that,
We have
yeah.
those are the backup plans, and it's fascinating, and sometimes my parents were very hesitant. My dad was like, "Oh, Lenny, your mom doesn't wanna know about this," and mom was like, "I don't wanna know about this," and I'm laughing because, I mean, mom didn't even have a key initially to dad's office when I first started these discussions, and then, yeah.
Yeah, there's just so much. It's like you said, it's overwhelming to think about. I'm sitting here absorbing what you're saying and saying, God, I don't have any of this figured out. That's why I bring people like you onto the show because it's a learning experience for me. Honestly, I learn more from doing this than I ever could teach people.
Yeah, but you
Um,
are a gift to the world too for those of us that have I do no longer have parents, but for those that do and are in a real pickle, you are the sweet of the sour pickle.
well, thank you. It's another story for another time, but I have a nickname called the Pickle Man because I am known in certain circles to get people out of a pickle with their mortgage applications.
Okay, so I'm right. I'm aligned with
You're
that
on
part.
track. Yes, for sure, for sure. So Lynn, if a family wanted to come to you, I know you said there's a certain cost for like the initial consultation and
Its
the
initial
kind of
is
overview.
complimentary, and then the well-being checkup is I charge $350.
Very reasonable and something that every family should do. And I think also what we find is that sometimes when people engage with professionals, I'm already thinking about the millions of people I need to connect you with because
I
I
have
think these
tips for
issues
you.
are missing.
Ted.
But like I think our past clients, a lot of them are parents and their kids are probably, like a lot of them
And
are
what's
roughly
so
my age or
weird
they're
is
coming of
that,
age.
like, all the rules, especially if your child goes out of state, I mean, this must be my okay. My graduate degree is in higher ed administration and student personnel. I did that before and then the MBA stuff came my year too. But I will tell you that each place, if they're going out of state for trade, for college, even just to work, then they have I mean, there are different rules that apply for you're at home and you're away, and it's like nuts. So I literally dig in and say, okay, what's going on, blah, 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 and then research. I do like parent help all the time.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, I'm thinking about all the things I do to protect my kids and my
Yes.
family, but you know what? If something happened, God forbid, to all of us at once, there's
Yeah, I know.
nobody that could get into my house, so easily to get, and they
Well,
wouldn't know where to go to get anything or, where we
and I'll
keep the
tell you,
important
for
doc.
me, I fly solo. I haven't been married yet. And so my powers of attorney think I am the biggest pain in the butt known to mankind because I, of course, have everything detailed. And, they have keys and they have gate codes and they have and I do like little practice discussions. Okay, if this worked, and one past client actually makes his kids get on the phone with him before New Year every year, and they, like, do a practice run with access and this and that because they are his people, his helpers.
Right. Right. Yeah, and, getting into bank accounts to be able to make a payment for a mortgage so your mortgage doesn't go late if something were to happen to a family member, just I mean,
Well,
I
and
can only
setting
imagine
up
like
the
a
bank
million things.
account the way that that particular bank needs you to for someone to access it, because I, had to go round and round with mine because I wanted to make sure, especially let's just pretend, I'm infirm or unable to speak, and I want somebody to pay my bills. Well, guess what? Power of attorney triggers. Well, how does that happen when is for the bank itself, and each bank has its own rules. So
Right.
I
Or
encourage people
or
to
the
go to
laptop's
their
locked
bank.
and you don't know the password to even open the laptop that has all this password stored. It's great to know that you have legal access to the accounts, but you can't physically
If you
access
can't get
them.
there. Well, the
Right.
digital side, I thought my brother was gonna throw up when I said, "Have you named a power of attorney for your digital assets in your latest estate plan?" Blah, 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 and he's like, "Oh, God, Lynn, just shush." And I said, "Well, there's a whole thing across the US. Is it property? How is it classified?" So that was the interesting piece for him to learn, and he and my sister-in-law, and my sister and brother-in-law were like,
And Lynn, can you work with families that are dealing with that crisis mode? Like, is there a service that you offer where maybe a family member has already had some sort of medical issue? Because we find oftentimes with the seniors that we work with and the families, there has been a crisis already. And now they're trying to figure out how to put the pieces together because maybe there wasn't a plan initially. So is that something that you can help families with as well when they're in that sort of crisis moment trying to figure out how to help their loved one?
there is a part of me that says I'm still healing from the 35 years of dealing with my own. And so I love being the proactive cheerleader and try to reserve it for my family and my really close friends. Now, I am also a big sap. So if somebody who needs something and they're saying, "How do I do this?" I mean, I'm happy to have a short consultation.
Got it. But primarily you're doing mostly planning for future events that hopefully will
Or
never.
after the crisis when they realize, "Okay, I don't know what any of us need. What do we need now?" Then we can do that.
Got it. Okay. Well, geez, I'm going to spend the rest of my day figuring out how to shorten the list of people that I need to introduce you to. But it's
Thank
so
you.
relevant at so many different stages of life. When you have kids, when you're
I know.
becoming an adult from being a kid, as
If
your
you fly
parents are aging, as you're
solo if
aging.
you fly
Yeah.
solo too, I mean, because that's a whole different bailiwick.
Yeah, and I would assume it changes over time too, so there are probably updates that need to be made, just like an estate plan. We've talked a lot about that on the show with,
Yeah,
estate
and I
planning
mean, I
attorneys, that it's
love
not
our
a static.
attorneys. I mean,
Yeah,
the estate planning attorneys, they are an amazing resource. So is your accountant, frankly, because, we have taxation issues to deal with after the passing and, things of that nature. So, your professional team is important. What you
for
do,
sure.
I mean, you're key. You're kind of the third leg of the triangle.
Mhm,
So we have the
for
accounting
sure.
side and the legal side and you.
But it's great to have all that, but it doesn't you need the glue that holds it all together, which is the logistics for how to actually physically do the things that you're now legally allowed to do, but how do
Required
you
or
actually do them?
required to do.
Right, right. How do you do it? How do you open that laptop? Do you have the password? How do you open the door to get access to all the things that
That's
you
my
have the right
favorite
to
part.
access? Yeah,
I mean, it's kind of like, "Okay, hold on, we're not gonna hypnotize you or anything crazy like that," but it's like, "Okay, get inside your brain. When you wake up in the morning, you do certain things, but when you leave the house, what do you have to do? When you get in the house, what do you have to do? When you do this, do you" because we do it on autopilot. We are conditioned and our, neuroplasticity is running its thing, and we just do, 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 and don't even think about it. So, we just pause for a moment and think.
right. Yeah, and like you said, sometimes families have that more traditional model of, well, this person does this, and it's a divide and conquer, and they really don't know how to do each other's roles so
Well,
well, or
yeah.
how to even start. So even though they're living in the same house and maybe
Well,
married,
because 'cause
maybe
we're
not.
counting on I mean, we count on each other to, just take care of that side of the house because you're overwhelmed. You got a full-time job, you have kids, you have parents, you have this, you have that. It's like, "Oh, good, thank God that piece I don't have to worry about, but I have to do this, 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 and this." But each of those 2 people are thinking the same thing and don't know what the other is doing.
Feel like this should be a mandatory next step after you create an estate plan. I'm gonna create your business model for you if you haven't already.
Well, thank you, and I do it sometimes before the estate plan because then they have come a little they've been conditioned a little bit to know kind of things that they might wanna think about and ask.
Well, the logistics are really critical. So, Lynn, thank you so much for
Welcome.
joining me today. This was
Thanks
really
for having me.
insightful. Of course. No, this is always fun, and like I
I
said, I
hope I didn't
learned.
scare everybody, but, how do we eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Right, exactly. But if you don't start taking bites, you're gonna wish you had someday. So that's a big part of why we do this show is to help people prepare in advance. And the things that you do and the things that you talk about are just, even though we talk to estate attorneys and
I know.
accountants and financial people all the time, this is not something honestly I've ever heard come up. before is the logistics. And you're like
Well,
the
and think of it from their
logistical guru.
perspective. I mean, we don't count on them to do that. We count on them to execute the rest of it. I mean, each of these particular little planks and pillars in life, they play theirs, but because I've had such broad experience, I know those, but I also know these.
Right. Exactly. Well, you're a very, very valuable person in the overall process. I'm glad to
Thank you.
highlight you and let people know about what you do and the service that you offer. I think it's
Thank you.
tremendously valuable. I think we need to talk offline about me getting my stuff together, bleep together.
Get your ducks in a row, get them quacking, and then I'll be gum on your shoe.
Oh, I felt like I had a lot of ducks in a row until we had this conversation, and now I feel totally unprepared. But
No, you're okay.
we'll
Breathe.
get there. We'll get there. But Lynn, thank you so much, and thank you so much to our audience for tuning into this session today. I think Lynn had some great insights to share. And Lynn, if somebody wants to connect with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
Well, it's funny. This whole social media thing is definitely available, but my office number is area code 951-00-59. Call or text. And it often goes to voicemail because that's just what you do when you're in these kinds of things. Or you can email me at Lynn, Lynn, at thelivingplanner.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, I hope your inbox and voicemail will be filling up with people that need your help because I think there's a whole lot of them that do. And I'm glad that more people know about you and what you do now. So
Thank you
thank
for
you
sharing. I
for
appreciate
sharing.
it.
Absolutely. And thank you again for joining this episode. And we will see you all next time. Take care.